Hi, welcome to this tutorial. So in this tutorial, we are going to be parsing strings in JavaScript. So we're going to look at the different ways of doing that. We're going to look at using the split function to parse a string and split it up. And we're going to look at different ways to actually convert a string to an integer by parsing it. And then finally, we are going to look at how to convert a JSON string, into an object. So that's also considered parsing. So we're going to be looking at all of these in this particular tutorial. So let's get right into it then. Alright, to start with, we are going to use the split method to parse a string in JavaScript. So right now I have my JavaScript practice folder right here, and it has an index.html like this and a script.js, and the script has been connected from the index.html. Okay, so all of that is fine. Now we mostly won't be using our index.html in this particular lesson, but we still need it because HTML is the one that's producing your output. And also I have this extension right here. If you go to the extensions, you'll see the live server extension by Ritwik, and that's the one I'm using to get my live server. So you can just right click and press on the open live server and you'll get this temporary live server, or this is basically for development purposes. You can use it to check your output and things like that. So this is what I'm using. And obviously, as you can see, I'm using Visual Studio Code. You can use any editor you want. Now, as I was telling, so let's say you have a string of numbers, but each of these numbers are separated by a dot like this. Okay. And you want them extracted. Okay. You want each of these numbers extracted. You don't want these dots. You want to access these numbers. So how do you do that? Well, you have something called a split method in JavaScript. So the split method, basically, it splits the string into different mini strings and places them inside of an array. And you can give a split condition like I've just given in here. So I've given the split condition as this dot, as this period, which means that please remove all these periods, and whatever is in between them, please take them and place them in separate arrays. Now you'll see how that works when I print this out, this split out. Okay, because it actually doesn't change the value of str in any way. It actually creates a duplicate which is our array. So we can place this in any variable we want. We've placed it in split and we've done a console log. I'll save it now. See, there you go. We have an array of 10 elements and each of these are the numbers that we want. Okay, so this is the easiest way of parsing a string into different things. So instead of this, you could probably just have nothing. You could have nothing, not your dots, but just numbers like this. You can, and you want them separated from here. So what you would do is you'll just give an empty string in here, which means please get every single character, which is our number in here. If you refresh, you'll still get this. Okay, it works perfectly. But that's all well and good, but there's no use in getting this because as you can see here, it is still a string. So what can you do with a string? You can't add, you can't do any calculations with it. So for that, what you need to do is you need to use the Parseint. So next is the parse. Okay, so you have something called Parseint, which helps you convert string to an integer. So make sure that it doesn't have a decimal point. So if it has a decimal point, it'll be rounded up, or the decimal will be removed if there's no rounding off option. Okay, so make sure it's just an integer. In our case, it's just an integer, right? So once we've split up, what we can do is we can go through the split, which is now an array. Okay, I can use the for each method, which will go through the split, okay, which will go through each of the elements of the array. And if for every iteration, I can get that in a dummy variable like this, a dummy variable. It can be anything. You can name this anything you want. I'm going to name it S. So if for every iteration of this particular split array, I'm going to get it in my S. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to parse it. Okay, so this is how you use your parse. S10. So 10 indicates that it's log 10, which is mean base 10, which means it's an integer. It has no decimal points. So you can do this without mentioning the 10 as well. It will still work. Because if you want to, if you give 2, that means it will be the base 2, which means the log number, right? So that's why you can use the bases, the second argument. But for integer, it's default, so you can just use parseint and just give the value. So we are converting the elements in my split array into integers. Okay, and every time I do that, after I do that maybe, so what I can do is I can do a console.log of split to now see how my elements look. So if I refresh now, let's see what happens. Oops, it's not working. Okay, this is not working. That's mainly because if you get this, it's not going to actually affect your split. So what I can do is I can create a new variable in here. Let j is equal to 0 like this, and I can just replace the value, okay, of s in here after it has been parsed, right? After this s has been parsed, the temporary variable after it has been parsed, what I can do is I can just replace the current value of my split of j, which would be equivalent to this. I can replace that with s, and finally if I do a console.log of the entire split, let's see what happens. Okay, and okay, it still doesn't work because I have to increment j. So for every iteration I have to increment the value of j, otherwise it wouldn't work. So if you look at the output right now, perfect. So these are numbers, but numbers in strings. Now these are converted. These are proper numbers, integers. And why? Because for every iteration we converted that particular temporary variable into a number, and we reassigned it to our split array and incremented it and all of that, so we can get an array of numbers and not just an array of numbered strings, right? Alright, so similarly you can use this on your parse float as well. So if you have, I don't know, if you have decimal numbers, for example, let's say I have something like this, 15.578. So this is the number I have. In that case, I can just use int number is equal to, if I use parseint, that would be, let's see what happens. Okay, console.log of integer version would be int num, and similarly let's create another variable called float num. Okay, parse float and str. So now you'll see what happens. Floating point version float now, like this, right? So if you go and look at the output right now, see the integer version of 15.578 is actually 15, and the floating point version of 15.578 is 15.578, but none of this is the string, and you can see the difference because if I do a console.log of that str, you'll see the quotes around that string. So okay, actually if I do a type of, okay, type of str, you'll know that it's a string. But this one, if I do a console.log of type of in num like this, you will see that it's a number, and this would be a number as well. Now one more thing I want to check. What if this is not 578? What if this is 879 or something like that? Would it round it off? Oops, unfortunately it doesn't round it off. So it's a very risky thing to use your integer on parseint on your string like this. Okay, in string of number like this, it could, you know, lead to inaccurate values. Alright, so that's all well and done. Finally, what I want to do is I want to convert a JSON string to a JavaScript object. So you know how a JSON string looks like, right? So within your, within normal quotes, alright, so you can have something like this. Good, so this is how your JSON string would look. So the values, right? And then the property names within quotes and the values within quotes. For your objects, you don't really have to do that, but for your JSON strings, you have to. So this is how it would look. Now, if the value is not an if the value is not a string, you can place it without quotes. but the property name has to always be placed within quotes. So let's say this is what we have right now. So we have a JSON object. It's encased in a string. Okay, so if you're using double quotes for your property names, then you have to use a single quote for the entire JSON string, sorry. So it's a string, right? So it has to be placed within a quote, and in here you have your opening and closing parenthesis, flower brackets, just like you would in a normal object. And the only difference is that you have your properties encased in quotes as well. The values don't have to be if they're not a string. Alright, so you have all of that now. So I want to convert this. So let's say I create a constant because the value is not going to change much, but you can make this a variable if you want. So I'm using the JSON object and just parse. What do I want to parse? The str that I just have right here. Alright, so the json.parse method is what I'll be using, and I'm parsing the str. So now if I do a console.log of the student, you'll see exactly what I get. See, I have a proper object. Now these aren't encased within quotes if you notice. So it's now an object now, right? And I can actually check if it's an object. For example, what I can do is I can do another console.log and I can see if I can get the values. So student.firstname and then student.last name, okay, is student.age years old and scored a total of student.total marks in this academic year. There you go. So this is what we have right here. So I'm actually checking if this works. So let's see if it works. There you go. See, John Smith is 15 years old and scored a total of 490 marks in this academic year, which means that this is a proper object because you couldn't have accessed it beforehand. If you do a str.firstname, this would actually give you an error. Actually, if you want, I can try it. So str.firstname, because we still have something in the JSON object. See, it gives us undefined because with your JSON object, you can't really access it like this. But if you convert it into an object, you can access it. All right. So similarly, for the ending, let's try to convert a JSON array into a JavaScript array. Because again, just like we had a problem with your JSON object, what happens in here is that you can't really do anything with the array if it's just a JSON array. So you have to convert it if you want something to happen. And let's see what happens in here. So it has to be within a string, just like before, and all of these have to be within quotes, but that's mainly because these are strings. Otherwise, they don't have to be within quotes. There you go. So this is our array. Let's say we have const fruits. Actually, I would like to make this a variable because, you know, I might want to manipulate this in some way. JSON.parse of, actually, I want to name this ARR to indicate array and not str. Alright, and now if you do a console.log of fruits, and let's say we make fruits of 0, 1, 2, the one where there's apple, I'm going to make this another fruit, so peaches, something like that. Okay, and now let's say I want to do another console.log of fruits, because if I were able to change this, that means it's now become an array, proper array. Right, so we have banana, mango, see, now it's changed to peach. So it has been converted into a JavaScript array and we were able to manipulate it because I made it a variable and not a constant. So perfect, it works perfectly. So these are the different ways of parsing your string in JavaScript. I really hope you liked this tutorial. So if you did, please like the video and please subscribe. And when you subscribe, press on the bell button so you get notifications when I post new videos. I'll be posting videos every single day. And I'll be posting a lot of videos like this, but not just this, I'll also be posting videos on creating small applications and mini tutorials and small courses on different topics. I'll be tackling a lot of topics, a lot of web development and Python and data science topics. All right, so I really hope you subscribe, guys. I'll see you on the other side. Thank you.